Yugi's grandfather is one of the most important people in Duel Monsters, yet the show often treats him like a piece of luggage that villains can kidnap whenever Yugi needs motivation. Solomon Muto discovered the Millennium Puzzle, introduced Yugi to games, owned one of the rarest cards in existence, and survived adventures long before the main story began. Somehow, he still spends large parts of the series standing in the background and explaining cards everyone else has already seen. Before looking at whether the show treated him fairly, we need to go through his full story. Solomon's life contains much more than owning a card shop and occasionally being sent to the hospital by billionaires. If you enjoy longer character essays like this, please subscribe to the channel. Unlike a shadow game, the decision can be reversed without losing your soul. Long before Yugi began playing Duel Monsters, Solomon was an adventurer. He traveled across the world, studied ancient ruins, and became skilled in many different games. The series does not give us a complete record of every expedition, but it establishes that Solomon spent much of his younger life searching for lost history. His interest in games was serious. He understood them as pieces of culture, ways of thinking, and tests of character. That attitude eventually shaped Yugi, who rarely sees a game as simple entertainment. To Yugi, the way a person plays reveals something about who they are. He learned much of that from his grandfather. Solomon's most important expedition took him to Egypt, where he entered the tomb of an unknown pharaoh. Inside, he discovered the Millennium Puzzle. The journey was dangerous. The tomb contained traps, unstable passages, and warnings designed to keep intruders away. Solomon nearly died while trying to reach the chamber containing the puzzle. At one point, he felt as though a mysterious figure had saved him from falling. He would later realize that the person connected to that moment was the spirit of the pharaoh himself. Solomon removed the Millennium Puzzle from the tomb and brought it back to Japan. From a historical point of view, taking a priceless object from an ancient tomb and placing it in the family game shop raises a few questions. Solomon handles archaeology with the confidence of a man who assumes museums will eventually hear about it through word of mouth. Still, he does not steal the puzzle for money. He understands that it carries some unknown importance, and he protects it for years. He eventually gives the separated pieces to Yugi. The puzzle takes Yugi around 8 years to complete. Solomon knows it is extremely difficult, and he encourages his grandson to keep trying. Yugi has no idea that completing it will awaken the spirit of an ancient pharaoh. Solomon appears unaware of the full consequences too, although handing an unidentified Egyptian artifact to a child remains a very relaxed approach to grandparenting. Yugi solves the puzzle after wishing for true friends. The spirit inside it awakens and begins sharing Yugi's body. This event creates the foundation of the entire series, and it only happens because Solomon found the puzzle, protected it, and trusted Yugi with it. By the beginning of Duel Monsters, Solomon owns the Kame game shop and lives with his grandson. Yugi's parents are almost entirely absent from the story, leaving Solomon as the most important adult in his daily life. He gives Yugi a home, teaches him games, and provides the environment where Yugi develops his love of Duel Monsters. Solomon also owns a Blue Eyes White Dragon. Only 4 copies of the card are known to exist, and Seto Kaiba has collected 3 of them. Solomon received the 4th from his old friend Arthur Hawkins, another explorer and gaming expert. The history behind that card is more meaningful than its rarity. Years earlier, Solomon and Arthur became trapped during an expedition with very little water. They used a game of Duel Monsters to decide who would receive the remaining supply. Solomon could have won, but he recognized that Arthur had a family waiting for him and deliberately gave up his winning position. Arthur survived and later gave Solomon the Blue Eyes White Dragon as a sign of friendship and gratitude. The card became valuable to Solomon because of the person and memory attached to it. Kaiba sees the same card and reaches a slightly different emotional conclusion. He decides he must own it. He offers Solomon money and an entire collection of rare cards, but Solomon refuses. He explains that the Blue Eyes carries emotional value and cannot be replaced. Kaiba responds by forcing an elderly man into a duel. In the anime, Solomon is taken to Kaiba's facility and made to play using the advanced holographic system. Kaiba defeats him, takes the Blue Eyes, and tears it apart so nobody can ever use it against him. Solomon is left physically and emotionally exhausted. Yugi finds him and sees the destroyed card. Solomon tells Yugi that every card contains the heart of the person who owns it, a lesson Yugi carries throughout the series. Yugi challenges Kaiba and uses Solomon's deck. Kaiba summons all 3 of his Blue Eyes dragons and believes the duel is finished. Yugi assembles all 5 pieces of Exodia and defeats him. The victory belongs to Yugi, but the emotional reason comes from Solomon. Yugi is defending his grandfather and the idea that cards have value beyond their strength. Kaiba sees cards as weapons and possessions. Solomon taught Yugi to see the relationships around them. This gives Solomon an important role in the first episode. He represents the values Yugi will defend for the rest of the series. It also establishes the pattern for how the show will use him. A villain hurts Solomon, Yugi becomes motivated, and Solomon watches from somewhere nearby while his grandson settles the matter. Pegasus takes this pattern much further. After learning about Yugi's victory over Kaiba, Pegasus challenges him through a videotape. Using the Millennium Eye, Pegasus turns the remote duel into a shadow game. Yugi runs out of time before he can win, and Pegasus takes Solomon's soul. Solomon's body remains behind while his soul is imprisoned inside a card. Pegasus uses him as leverage to force Yugi into the Duelist Kingdom tournament. This means the entire first major storyline begins as a rescue mission. Yugi wants to save his grandfather. Joey wants to win the prize money for his sister's operation. Both enter the tournament for someone they love. Solomon spends most of the arc unable to act. His soul occasionally appears to encourage Yugi, but he is largely a hostage. Pegasus understands that taking Solomon is the easiest way to control Yugi. The plan works because Solomon is Yugi's emotional center. Yugi will risk his life, enter a private island controlled by a mind-reading millionaire, and face opponents using rules Pegasus appears to invent during lunch. At the end of Duelist Kingdom, Yugi defeats Pegasus. Solomon's soul is released, and he wakes up. His rescue gives the season its emotional conclusion. The show quickly brings his past back through Rebecca Hawkins, Arthur's granddaughter. Rebecca arrives believing Solomon stole the Blue Eyes White Dragon from Arthur. She challenges Yugi because the card has already been destroyed and cannot simply be returned. Yugi accepts, partly to defend his grandfather's reputation. During their duel, Yugi reaches a winning position and chooses to surrender. Arthur recognizes the decision because it mirrors what Solomon did during their expedition. Solomon had given up his victory so Arthur could have the remaining water. Rebecca learns that Solomon never stole the Blue Eyes. Arthur gave it to him willingly. This storyline adds an important quality to Solomon. He is competitive and deeply interested in games, but winning is not always his highest priority. He understands that the conditions around a game matter more than the result. Yugi has inherited that attitude. He will fight with everything he has when the duel matters, yet he can place another person above victory. The heart of the cards is often treated as a magical ability, but Solomon's lesson is much more practical. Cards carry meaning because people place meaning into them. After this, Solomon's role becomes smaller. During Battle City, he remains an important source of knowledge and support. He understands duel monsters, helps the younger characters, and follows Yugi's progress. The tournament revolves around Egyptian god cards and the history connected to Yugi's Millennium Puzzle, which should make Solomon extremely relevant. He is the person who found the puzzle in the pharaoh's tomb. He has experience in Egypt, knows ancient history, and understands games. The story could have used him to investigate the connection between the god cards, the Millennium items, and the pharaoh. Instead, he usually stands beside the duels and reacts. Some of this makes sense. Battle City is Yugi's journey, and Solomon cannot answer the central mystery because he never learned the pharaoh's identity. His discovery of the puzzle gives him a connection to the history without giving him complete knowledge. Even so, the show regularly reduces him to basic explanations and worried reactions. He becomes the adult who confirms that the giant Egyptian monster currently blocking the sky is probably a serious card. When Yugi and Kaiba duel, Solomon can explain their strategies. When Merrick threatens the finalists, Solomon worries about his grandson. When the supernatural danger becomes impossible to ignore, he is present as support. He rarely affects the direction of events. The virtual world storyline continues this problem. Kaiba's old executives in Noah trap the group inside a computer world, where losing a duel can result in losing a body. Solomon is again surrounded by dangerous events tied to games and technology, but most of the direct conflict belongs to Yugi, Joey, Kaiba, and their friends. At this stage, Solomon has the background of an adventurer and the knowledge of an experienced duelist. The story usually remembers his age before remembering either of those qualities. The Waking the Dragon storyline also leaves him mainly in a supporting position. Darts and the Orichalcos begin stealing souls, real monsters appear across the world, and Yugi loses the Pharaoh's soul after using the seal of Orichalcos. Solomon remains one of the people Yugi can return to, but he cannot guide him through the crisis. His role is emotional stability. He provides a home and a familiar face while the younger characters handle the actual danger. That stability has value. Yugi's life would be considerably worse without an adult who accepts strange magical events with very few follow-up questions. Solomon has seen enough ancient tombs to understand when normal family rules need a temporary adjustment. Still, the difference between his history and his current role becomes difficult to ignore. This is a man who traveled through ruins, survived traps, and recovered a Millennium item. The show often treats walking beside Yugi as though it would be too demanding. Solomon finally receives more attention during the Kaiba Corporation Grand Championship. Kaiba organizes another tournament, and Solomon secretly enters as a masked duelist. He hides his identity because he wants a chance to prove that he can still compete. He has spent years watching Yugi and his friends receive recognition while people treat him as an old shopkeeper. His deck reflects his history. He uses ancient-themed cards connected to exploration and forgotten civilizations. For once, his life before Yugi becomes part of how he duels. Solomon eventually faces Joey. The duel is partly comedic because the audience watches Yugi's grandfather attempting to protect his disguise while behaving exactly like Yugi's grandfather. Joey does not immediately recognize him, which says more about Joey than the disguise. Solomon plays well and proves that his knowledge is genuine. He understands combinations, plans ahead, and creates serious difficulty for Joey. He eventually loses, but the defeat does not make him look useless. Joey has become a strong duelist by this point. Making him work to defeat Solomon gives both characters respect. Joey demonstrates how far he has developed, while Solomon proves that his experience belongs in an actual duel rather than another explanation from the audience area. The storyline also reveals that Solomon feels overlooked. He loves Yugi and takes pride in his success, but part of him still wants to be recognized as a player. He has spent his life studying games and collecting rare objects. Being reduced to the owner of the shop where the younger characters buy cards has clearly become irritating. His decision to enter secretly is ridiculous, although it fits him. Solomon shares Yugi's love of games, but has more pride than his grandson. He wants the younger generation to respect him without having to request that respect directly. Near the end of the series, Solomon's history becomes important again when Yugi travels to Egypt to uncover the pharaoh's past. The Millennium Puzzle has led everyone back to the tomb where Solomon found it. He can finally explain more about his expedition and his strange connection to the pharaoh. The mysterious figure who saved him inside the tomb was connected to Adam, the pharaoh whose spirit eventually became Yugi's partner. This creates an important circle. Adam helped Solomon survive long before Solomon knew who he was. Solomon carried Adam's puzzle out of the tomb and eventually gave it to Yugi. Yugi solved it, awakened Adam, and gave him the friendship required to recover his identity. Solomon's discovery was never random. His life became the bridge between Adam's forgotten past and Yugi's present. When the final ceremonial duel takes place, Solomon watches Yugi face Atum. The duel is painful because winning means Atum will finally leave. Solomon understands how much the spirit has meant to his grandson, but he also understands that Yugi needs to prove he can stand alone. Yugi wins and Adam passes into the afterlife. Solomon is present when the story created by his discovery reaches its end. He found the puzzle as a young adventurer, gave it to a lonely child, and lived long enough to watch that child defeat the pharaoh inside it. That is the main story of Solomon Muto in Duel Monsters. He begins as an explorer, becomes a game shop owner, and raises the boy who will complete the pharaoh's journey. His actions create nearly every major event in the series, even when he is absent from the duels themselves. The question is whether the show treats him fairly. The first problem is that Solomon repeatedly becomes an object used to motivate Yugi. Kaiba attacks him and destroys his card. Pegasus steals his soul. Other villains threaten him or place him in danger because harming Yugi's grandfather creates an immediate emotional response. This is effective storytelling at first. The audience has only just met Yugi, so seeing his grandfather injured gives the duel against Kaiba a clear personal reason. Pegasus taking Solomon's soul gives Yugi a reason to enter Duelist Kingdom beyond wanting to win a tournament. The problem develops through repetition. Once Solomon has served as a hostage, the show struggles to find other uses for him. He becomes a combination of family member, museum guide, and emergency victim. His abilities also change depending on what the episode requires. When his past is discussed, Solomon is an experienced traveler who survived Egyptian tombs and mastered games across the world. During most present-day adventures, he is treated as physically helpless and strategically unnecessary. Age explains some of that difference. Solomon is an elderly man, and sending him into every dangerous situation beside Yugi would be irresponsible. Of course, the characters regularly allow children to play card games where losing can destroy their souls, so safety has never been this group's strongest policy. The larger reason is that Duel Monsters is a story about Yugi growing beyond his grandfather. Solomon gives him the puzzle, the cards, and the moral foundation. Yugi must eventually make his own decisions. Keeping Solomon in a strong leadership position could weaken that development. If he knew every answer about Egypt, Yugi would have less to discover. If he solved every problem, Yugi would remain the child following him. The show is right to keep Solomon away from the center of Yugi's journey. It goes too far in the other direction. Solomon could have contributed through research, strategy, and knowledge without taking Yugi's position. Battle City would have been an obvious opportunity. A tournament involving Egyptian god cards, millennium items, and an ancient pharaoh should create more work for the man who recovered the millennium puzzle from Egypt. He could have investigated the tomb, translated information, or recognized details from his expedition. Instead, much of the historical explanation comes from characters like Ishizu while Solomon watches. The show also does very little with the destruction of his Blue Eyes White Dragon after the first episode. The card was a gift representing Arthur's friendship and Solomon's willingness to sacrifice a victory to save him. Kaiba destroys it in front of Solomon, and the series quickly moves forward. Kaiba is punished through his defeat, but Solomon never receives the card back. His emotional loss becomes part of Yugi and Kaiba's rivalry, rather than a continuing part of Solomon's story. This is one of the clearest examples of how the show uses him. Solomon's pain becomes fuel for another character. The masked tournament storyline feels like an attempt to correct that treatment. Solomon receives his own deck, motivation, and duel. We see his pride, skill, and desire for recognition. The show plays much of it for comedy, but that is reasonable. Solomon is naturally warmer and stranger than characters like Kaiba. Giving him a dark, serious storyline about proving his power would feel excessive. An elderly man secretly entering a tournament in disguise is funny because the disguise appears to fool people who have known him for years. His loss to Joey also makes sense. Joey needs to be strong enough to defeat an experienced duelist, and Solomon's age does not automatically make him unbeatable. The duel gives him dignity without pretending he should suddenly challenge Yugi for the World Championship. The final Egypt storyline treats him with the greatest respect. His history with the puzzle finally becomes part of Adam's story, and his discovery receives a larger purpose. Solomon is revealed as one of the people who made Yugi and Adam's relationship possible. Even there, he remains outside the main action for much of the time. His importance is historical and emotional rather than active. I think the show's treatment of Solomon makes sense in its broad direction, but wastes much of his potential. He should never have replaced Yugi as the central character or followed him into every duel. His age, role as guardian, and limited knowledge of the Millennium items provide believable reasons for him to remain behind. Yet Duel Monsters often forgets that Solomon had a life before becoming Yugi's grandfather. He was an explorer, a knowledgeable gamer, and a person trusted with the object containing Aim's spirit. Those qualities deserved more than one disguised tournament appearance and several speeches from the sidelines. The strange part is that Solomon succeeds as a character despite the show's limited use of him. We understand why Yugi loves him. He is patient, playful, and willing to trust his grandson. He allows Yugi to grow without demanding credit for it. The lessons he gives Yugi remain present even when Solomon is absent. Yugi respects the meaning inside cards because Solomon taught him to. Yugi believes games reveal character because Solomon lived that belief. Yugi can place friendship above victory because Solomon once gave up a win to protect Arthur. Even Yugi's relationship with Adem begins with Solomon carrying the puzzle home from Egypt. The show often treats him like a supporting character because that is technically his position. His influence is much larger than his screen time suggests. Solomon Muto may spend too much of Duel Monsters being kidnapped, ignored, or asked to stand safely behind the younger characters. He still creates the conditions that allow the entire story to happen. Kaiba owns 3 blue-eyes dragons. Pegasus owns an island. Adem once ruled Egypt. Solomon is the man who quietly connects all of them to Yugi. For someone the show repeatedly leaves inside the game shop, he may have changed more lives than anyone in it.